Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Legacy Voices. My name is Lizzie Martinez, and I have had the great honor and privilege and pleasure of working for the Palace for nearly 25 years. We started this podcast to be able to honor and preserve the legacy of our amazing residents. And today we have another trailblazer with us. Her name is Dorothy Schafler. I want the audience to kind of stop for a second and imagine what it could have been like to join an elite crime-fighting agency where only 1% of the agents, FBI agents, were women. And that's who we have here today. Let's welcome Dorothy Schafler. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, Lizzie. Thank you for having me here.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I have so many questions, and poor Dorothy, I've been driving her bananas because I've already kind of been asking her and drilling her. And let's give the audience some history. So the year is 1924. J. Edgar Hoover becomes the director of the FBI. He bans women from joining the FBI, and he says that it's basically because women cannot keep up with the vigorous demands of the job. He's the director for 48 years. He passes away in 1972. And that same month, the FBI starts accepting applications from women. Dorothy joins in 1973, just 1 year later. Tell us about it. Take us from the beginning. Take us to the beginning.
Okay, first of all, not many people know that actually in the 1930s, 3 female employees were promoted to the position of special agent, and Hoover had every one of them fired.
Whoa. I did not know that.
Yeah,
No.
most people don't. But as you said, when he died, the FBI started accepting applications from women to become special agents. And I entered on duty April 9th, 1973.
What inspired you to join a predominantly male-dominated workforce? I mean, what was that like?
Well, do you want the inspiration or what it was like?
I want it all. Start with the inspiration.
Okay. I loved learning, and I wanted to be a teacher. I majored in Spanish, got my master's in it, student taught, and found out I don't like children. So I thought that being a teacher was really not the best career choice for me.
It was going to maybe hinder your career a little bit if you didn't like children.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I applied to several colleges, figuring that with a master's, I might be able to get a job. And there were so many people with PhDs without a job that I didn't have a chance. So I went to Washington, stayed with cousins who lived there, and walked around the city, walking in and out of agencies that started with World, Spanish, or Hispanic, and nobody was hiring.
Huh.
So I went into the Justice Building. At the time, the FBI and Department of Justice were in the same building. And I went to see if DOJ was hiring court interpreters. They weren't, but they said the FBI is looking for Spanish speakers. So I went down the hall, filled out an application, and got called in for a test and interview.
Wow. Talk about a career change.
Yeah.
From teacher, potentially becoming a teacher, to the FBI.
Right. It was
Wow.
unexpected, to say the least. Although one night when my parents and I were watching the Ephraim Zimbalist TV show, the FBI, I jokingly said, oh, maybe that's what I'll do.
Wow. And how did your parents take it?
My father was not happy that I was carrying a gun.
I'm just going to move your mic
Okay.
a little bit this way.
My parents were worried that I was going to shoot myself in the foot. They were proud of me.
Were they?
They were. I was raised to be very independent, very outspoken. My father thought I should have been a doctor. My mother thought I should have been a lawyer. But that would be more schooling. And I had been offered a full scholarship for the PhD, and I wasn't interested in finding a topic so obscure that it had never been written about before. So I just went and looked for a job.
You know, I think it's very, the only word that comes to mind is very cool of your parents not to try and stop you, because maybe at that time, because it was so few women that had joined the FBI, maybe another parent would have been like, no, I don't think you should do this. It's not right. It's too dangerous.
My parents didn't discourage me from doing what I wanted to do. They were always supportive of whatever I wanted.
Wow. So you joined the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what that was like. What challenges did you face?
Well, the first challenge was the test I was given. At the time, I don't know what the process is now. At the time, there were 3 tests that were given. Accountants took one, lawyers took another, and everybody else took a general knowledge test. I was given the law test. They were trying to keep me out.
Huh.
I realized many years later when talking to someone on my squad who said, did you ever stop to think that they tried to keep you out? And it hadn't occurred to me. I didn't know that there were different tests at the time.
So the first obstacle you faced is you were given a test that likely you would have failed, right? Because it's not like you studied for a law test. How did you?
I used to watch pretty much every lawyer show, that was on TV. I watched the FBI show. The first question was something every high school student would know, which is name 5 rights guaranteed in the Bill of Rights.
Okay.
And the questions got into, this is a crime that was committed, what evidence would you try to collect? Things that you just start making stuff up.
Okay.
And I also had to, because I came in under the language program, I had to take a language test, a Spanish test, which was very easy.
You passed
to me.
with flying colors.
Yeah, that wasn't a problem.
So you pass your tests, and now you join the agency. And talk to me about your first day. What was that like when you walk in? Did everybody's head kind of like, oh, who's that woman joining?
No, there were 4 women in my class.
Okay.
And pretty much everyone, at least in my class, you get to Quantico and you're just gobsmacked. Like, what am I doing here? What's it going to be? So everyone was pretty much on an even footing, although there were, in my class, men who thought that women shouldn't be agents. And
were they nasty to you? Were they rude?
Like one guy said, well, you may be good at the classroom stuff, but you have to prove yourself in the gym. And I just said, I don't have to prove anything to you because I speak my mind.
Good for you, Dorothy. You are so cool.
I don't feel cool. I feel old.
And this is why this is such an important podcast, because I feel like this is a way for us to go back in time and honor you and what you did and tell your story. There's so many people that live in the community that none of us know. I've known what you did, but I want to dive deeper. And I want to ask you, what is a story or a case or that really sticks out for you?
Well, I have a sort of funny story from my first office.
Okay.
I was in New Haven, and we had an auto theft ring case, and we were going out on the arrests, and there were 22 people being arrested.
Whoa.
And I was on the team that went to arrest a barber. And I got back to, the arrest went down fine because the FBI always has too many people for the one person they're arresting, just for security. And
they always call in the backup, right?
They have a lot of people.
Okay.
It's almost never a one-on-one or two-on-one.
Okay.
So I got back to the office, and because I was a Spanish speaker, I was running around reading all of the defendants their rights in Spanish. And when I finished that, people were looking at me sort of funny. And I didn't know why. And I found out that when we got back to the office, the case agent was telling everyone that when we got to the barber shop, the door was open. So I closed it so I could kick it in. And then I took the guy and threw him up against the wall. And of course, none of that was true. But they thought it would be sort of fun to spread that around.
To spread that rumor?
Yeah.
That's nice. Well, you know, that's kind of the stuff that works. That's workplace
Right.
practical jokes and things that's so cool. Your best friend, Debbie Lehman, was also an FBI agent.
No, she was
in the FBI.
She was in the FBI. She was a support person. And we met when I was transferred to an organized crime squad. Deb was the secretary on the squad, and that's how we met. And,
Wow.
you know, we've been friends for 50 years.
That's amazing. And you're still friends
We're
now.
still
You
friends.
still both live in the community.
Yep.
That's amazing. So you went to New York, right?
My second office.
Your
yes.
second office. And that's when you joined the organized crime unit, or?
I was first on the section that handled foreign counterintelligence.
Whoa.
And from there, I transferred to the organized crime section.
You were involved in some big cases.
Small roles in some big cases, yes.
Okay. Any that you can talk about?
Well, some I could talk about, but I'd have to kill you. So I won't talk about those.
Cut. No. Okay, let's go into the ones that, you know, are not going to threaten my life.
Okay. In organized crime, there's something called a Title III installation, which is a court-ordered planting of microphones in a residence or a business.
Okay.
And I was the first female agent to go in on a Title III installation. And it's sort of nerve-wracking.
Sure.
Because you don't know if the people who own the place are going to walk in when you're in there.
Scary.
Scary.
My heart is pounding as you're telling this story. I'm not kidding. I'm like I'm sweating and everything. Okay. So you have to plant this bug.
Right. The technical people actually plant the bug.
Okay.
Everyone else is there in a support sort of role. One of the places we were going into was a residence, and they had brought up a lockpick expert from Washington. And he was trying to pick the lock, and I looked up, tapped him on the shoulder, and pointed. There was an open transom over the door. So instead of having to waste time picking the lock, they just hoisted up the shortest guy there, and he went inside and opened the door. So, you know, some funny things go on.
Okay. And so then you were able to plant the bug.
Yes.
And your case moved forward and you caught the guy?
It wasn't my case. And actually, when you go in on something like that, you don't necessarily know how the case ends up.
Oh.
Because if you're not working the case, you don't hear about it for the most part.
It's sort of like on a need-to-know basis.
Right.
Okay.
You know, loose lips sink ships, that sort of thing. If people go out to lunch or dinner and they start talking about cases, you never know who's listening. I went up to the Bronx with some assistant district attorneys, and we just went up, you know, for dinner, whatever. And we were sitting in this restaurant on Arthur Avenue, and I heard, I don't remember if it was the guy behind the bar or one of the waiters say, "She's an FBI agent." They recognized me from having worked in Little Italy.
Whoa.
So you always have to be careful, you know, what you're saying.
Do you recall a time where you had to be like watching your back? Were you often, I guess what I'm trying to get at, were you scared at any time? Did you feel like?
Anytime you go on an arrest, you're scared. And if you're not, you're a fool. Because you don't know who else is there. You don't know who's armed and who isn't.
Right.
So, there was one time we went on a raid, and it was, I think it was pharmaceuticals. And there were, 24, 25 of us. And it's scary. You're going into a place, you don't know what's there. You don't know what you're going to find.
You don't know who's waiting for you on the other side of the door.
Exactly.
Wow. You are amazing. You're a trailblazer. What advice would you give to any young person listening now that maybe is looking to start a career or change careers and do something, that is just new and very challenging? I mean, what advice would you give?
Think about it carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Do research. Find out what the job is really about. It's not as glamorous as it looks. Most of what you do, if you're in law enforcement, is write papers. You have to document everything you do, even if you're doing an applicant background investigation and you knock on 20 neighbors' doors, you have to document each of those, even if the people whose doors you knock on don't know the person you're asking about. So a lot of it is tedium, but necessary to do. So research carefully. Consider, especially in something like the FBI, whether you're willing to move.
Oh, right, because relocating is a big...
You can be transferred anywhere they want to send you. Sometimes the hours are excruciatingly long.
12-hour days?
Sometimes even more. One kidnapping that I worked on, we had to work 8 a.m. to midnight each day, and the last day it went 24 hours. So you have to be willing to do that, to cancel vacations at the last minute if they say they need you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm a mom, so I need to know. Did you find the child? The kidnapping case?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I was sweating again.
And that was a sort of interesting case. It was the son of the owner of Seagram's.
Huh.
And
the son of
the owner of Seagram's. And 3 male agents and I were sitting in the back of a van in Manhattan, and it was a hot summer day, so we had the van doors open. At that point, we weren't undercover. We were sort of in a get ready in case you have to move. And Dick Cavett came up to the back of the van and said, "Can I offer you guys breakfast?" Which I thought was very sweet.
That was very nice. Did you say yes?
No, we thanked him for his offer.
It was very nice. Now that you say New York and Manhattan and all of this, of course, I think back to all these movies. I'm thinking Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and New York was sort of this area, right, or this city where a lot of organized crime took place.
Oh, yes.
Do you think you were exposed to even more dangerous things because you were in New York? Do you feel that maybe if you had been somewhere else, you wouldn't have seen half the things you saw?
I don't know, because the only other place I was New Haven, and that was just for a few months.
Right. But you wanted to be in New York.
I wanted to be in New York. I'm from New York. My family was in New York. And I feared being sent to Podunk, in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So
Dorothy, you're so cool. You are. You're just amazing. Let me ask you, what legacy do you want people to know, to leave behind? What do you want for everyone to know about you?
That I'm just a regular person. That's what FBI agents are. We're all just normal people who choose a career. I mean, I sort of fell into it. Normally, when you ask someone why they became an agent, it's, oh, I've wanted to be an agent since I was 6. So mine's a little bit different story.
You fell into this and you joined, I think you said you were 24 years old.
I was 24.
Can you talk to me about this picture, by the way?
Yes.
This is Dorothy.
That's me in the blue shirt and beige pants. And the people I'm with, the woman was the consul and the man the vice consul to the UN from Australia. And a friend of mine who was an immigration agent knew them, and they had asked if he could get them up to the FBI range. So I arranged for them to go shooting.
Cool. Of all the people you met, is there one person, character that really sticks out for you? That was maybe a mentor for you?
I can't really say that there was a mentor. I'm just trying to think. I wasn't expecting that question.
You mean I caught you off
You
guard
caught
a
me
little?
off guard. Yes. There were a couple of guys in my training class.
I think somebody's
were-
trying to tell you something, by the way. She was trying to get your attention. You could say it.
I- Oh, yeah. Yeah, the older agents were much more receptive
Really?
to having me there than the younger agents.
Really?
Yes. There were 2 men that I became quite close to. Eddie Devins, who was a cigar-smoking attorney, and Art Koppel. And they took me under their wing in New York.
They watched out for you?
They watched out for me when the supervisor said, get her out of the office because the inspectors were coming. They took me out. We went for breakfast somewhere.
Why? Why did they get you out of the office? Because the inspectors were coming.
Because the supervisor knew that I spoke my mind.
Oh, I see.
And inspections were fairly well controlled.
Got it.
And I was a wild card.
Okay. Do you consider yourself a wild card still now?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I was a training agent for new agents on the applicant squad.
So you were a TO? No, what is that called? I'm sorry, I've been watching a lot of cop shows lately. I've
that
been
training officer?
Yeah. So you were a training agent.
I was a training agent for new agents.
Okay.
And, an example of my wanting to buck the system, they had these booklets that were printed on blue paper for the training agents to fill out, for the new agents they were training. And we ran out of blue paper. And the guy in charge of doing this said, oh, my God, we don't have blue paper. And I said, so take white paper, write blue on it, and print the books. What's the big deal? But they didn't think that way.
So you were kind of a think outside the box kind of person.
Sometimes, yes.
Did you give the rookies a hard time?
Sometimes. But most of the time, I just really showed them the ropes. You go into a neighborhood to do a background investigation on someone and you knock on neighbors' doors. And I was with a new female agent, and we knocked on one door, and a woman answered, and we identified ourselves and were talking to her. And she said, considering that you're in law enforcement, you really don't want to knock on any other doors in this building. Because she didn't say it, but I would assume that there were people who were armed, who were not pro-law enforcement. And I just said to the trainee, let's go. We're not going to lose our lives doing a background investigation.
Of the agents that you trained, do any of them keep in touch with you?
No.
No?
No, I'm not in touch with anyone. The only person that I'm in touch with one woman that I trained, another woman that I didn't train but I met on the job, and the wife of Eddie Devins, who I mentioned before.
So were you specifically just training women agents?
Oh, no.
So you
No.
trained, okay.
Any of the new agents that came on the applicant squad.
Did you ever stop and think that you were paving the way
No.
for these? No?
No.
This is what makes you so cool. That you sort of downplay everything you did. And you really did, I mean, pave the way for so many women, men, everybody, really. I mean, and that's why when people listen to this podcast, and not just women, but young people are listening and they're scared to take on a new challenge, I want them to understand that you don't have to be scared. Look at you. You went into a field, again, that was predominantly male-dominated, and you walked in and took charge, and you weren't scared to speak your mind.
Yeah, my best advice to anybody is be true to yourself.
Be true to yourself. That's very good advice. Last question.
Okay.
Is there any questions coming from our director over there or our executive producer? We've got some people in the studio with us, very special people. Anything? Any questions? Okay. So then this is
They're
one.
afraid I'll say I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
Right. Everybody's life is threatened in here. Last question. Oh, sorry. There's a question coming.
Do you ever use the gun? I mean, exchange fire?
So let me just repeat it because they may not be able to hear it. The question is, did you ever use a gun or exchange fire? Was that your question?
Fortunately, no. The only time I had the gun out was, well, if you're making an arrest, you always have it at the ready, but on the firearms range.
Okay. So you
And that's what every agent hopes for.
You retired at 50,
Correct.
and you went in, you were 24 years old. You had a long career.
I wasn't 24 when I retired.
No, you went in at 24. You retired at 50. Right. You had a wonderful career with the FBI. If Hollywood knocked on your door and they were going to make a movie of your life, who would play Dorothy Schafler?
I think Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock?
Yes.
Okay, I love Sandra Bullock. Sandra, watch this podcast. So she would play your life.
Yes. I think her character in Miss Congeniality is sort of the way I was. She was sort of a rebel, sassy, spoke her mind, and stayed true to herself.
I love this. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. And until next time, guys, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Yay!